So I've had several people ask about starting and stopping the machine, and I think for a lot of people, when they're taught to use the treadle, or when they learn, or what they see other people do, they assume that standard practice is that you grab the wheel and turn it to get it started. But if I'm doing free motion quilting, I need both my hands sort of guiding. And even when I'm doing regular sewing, it's easier if I can keep my hands in place and not have to do this one hand here and not over here. So if I use my foot to move, and I don't know if this wheel is going to be in the picture or not, but if in this on this machine, and all singers, I believe, the wheel turns towards you. So if you were to do it by hand, you'd pull it forward. Now, if I press on the treadle pedal with my foot, I can see which way it's going to move. If I push right now, if I push forward or down, it's going to push back. So I have to push the other way to get it started. So even though it might look like I'm not looking here, I sort of out of the corner of my eye see which direction that wheel is going to move if I press on the pedal, and that's the way I turn it to get it started. And after a while, you'll get to the point where you can just judge without even having to look which direction that wheel is going to go when you press on it. So, and I can stop, and it stops, pretty quickly when I stop moving my foot, as long as I keep my foot on the pedal and just stop the pedal from moving back and forth. So again, if I look over at the wheel, see which direction it's going to turn if I push on it, I don't need to use my hand. I can just do the action with my foot. Or you could still, if you want, you can get it a little started with your hand if it's not going to move for you. But stop, start, stop, start. So you don't have to use your hand every time. And of course, it takes practice. And it's good to be able to learn how to stop when you're quilting. Good to be able to learn how to stop with the needle down. But you can always move that to the needle down position after you stop. But I have an almost easier time anymore getting this stopping and starting and doing the right speed with my feet than I do with electric foot pedal. And it becomes it's autopilot. You don't even think about it. It's just it just happens that after you've done a bunch of it, you become so accustomed to doing it that you don't have to think about it. Think of some mundane thing that you do all the time. For example, tying your shoes. When you first learned how to tie your shoes when you were a very little child, when you put that shoe on and went to tie those laces, you had to really think hard about what you were doing to make it work. And I bet now, if you were to take your shoes off, now try and put them back on, and actually think about what you're doing as you're tying them. You know, as if you were trying to do it for the first time, or trying to explain to somebody how you do that. It becomes almost, when you have to think about it that hard, it becomes almost impossible to do it really quickly. But when you're not thinking about it, if you just in the course of a normal day want to put your shoes on, you have no problem just sitting there and tying the laces and going, and you don't really think about it at all. Well, I think the operation of the machine is the same thing. You do it a bunch of times, and it just becomes something that you don't really have to think about that much, and that eventually you'll be able to get that machine to have the exact speed that you want it to, and you'll be able to make it go faster and slower and at varying positions and times, and you'll be able to stop it exactly where you want it to and start it up again, and it'll work fine. So that's in answer to a couple of different people who have been wondering about how I'm operating a treadle machine without using my hand to turn the wheel. And there are occasions when I'll have it where the machine stops and the pedal is in such a position that I don't have enough force to be able to make it move. But usually I don't need to touch it with my hand. It's just part of experience, and that you just kind of, without thinking about it, you just know where it's going. And the big part is knowing whether you need to, what cycle the wheel is in, so you know whether to push this way or that way with your foot to get it to go the direction you want it to. The other thing is, I have a couple of other machines that the wheel turns the opposite direction. So when I switch to one of those, like I have a white rotary, and that one, the wheel turns away from you, and also I think my Wheeler and Wilson goes that way. So when you switch to one of those, it takes me a few minutes to get used to which direction I need to turn. And I'll tell you on this one, if you start turning, if you start sewing with the wheel going the wrong direction, you will get a knotted mess. So you do need to always make sure that you're turning in the right direction. And it's funny because when I first started learning how to do this, and I realized that these old machines don't have a forward and a reverse. But I thought, well, if I just run the machine backwards, that's reverse, right? Well, no, it isn't. It doesn't work that way. So anyway, that's the deal about making the treadle go either forward, not go forward, but that's the deal about making the treadle start and stop without having to grab onto the flywheel and turn it by hand. One of the other things that makes that happen more easily on older machines is that the wheel is bigger, and that heavier, bigger, chunky wheel has more force to it, more centrifugal force. It makes it spin more easily. on some of the newer machines, that wheel is only about that big around. And on some of those, it's harder for me to start it without actually turning it by hand. But an older machine with a bigger wheel, you probably will never have, after you learn how to get that started, you will probably, if you practice, you'll probably be able to get to the point where you won't really ever have to touch that wheel. So that's about it for this time.